we were talking about political correctness in class and how it can be contentious. For example, if you listen to the debates about what is going on in Canada at the moment and how some people are objecting to being told what to say when they address certain gender types, you can see that there's a division. Some people think that it's necessary to say that you have to address these people in a certain way, and other people are complaining that they don't want to be told how to address anybody and they'll make their own decisions. And I don't know what the answer to this is, but I think it's interesting to think about not just political correctness when we think about language, but about the way we use words beyond politics to create the reality that we live in. Word choice is something that we build reality with. So think, for example, of the word classroom. In my field of education, it's common vocabulary, but I'm not sure it's so appropriate anymore. Class, classifying, classification. It's to do with identifying, defining characteristics that things share in common. It makes them the same. We classify animals that are the same, plants that are the same, and things in general. We classify people. In the UK, where I was brought up, there was a class system which was very powerful with regards to identity. The whole education at that time was based on classifying and identifying and sorting people out. At 11 plus, we all took an exam called that, the 11 plus. If you passed it, you went to grammar school. If you didn't, you went to other schools called secondary modern. And in the grammar school that I went to, each year had 4 classes, A, B, C, D. And of course, A was the top and D was the lowest. And within that class, whichever class you were in, you were ranked by annual examinations and you sat in rank order. So the top of the class was at the back right and the bottom of the class in a corner somewhere in the front row. The teachers came into our classroom, we didn't move, and so they could immediately tell who was what. And this whole thing reflects the quality control and quality assurance of mass production. It goes with a factory model. And, we grade things like eggs and rice in Japan in this way. But today, one of the major values or resources that we recognize in education is diversity and difference. This is partly because of pressures from globalization and human rights movements, but it's also because we need to develop problem-solving and creative thinking skills, which are essential for living in the 21st century. And one of the best sources of creativity is when different views or perspectives are synergized. So I'm not sure it makes sense to talk about a class anymore, a class of diversity. Classifying closes things up. Classes exclude what doesn't fit. So to go back to the British class system, when I was growing up, there were exclusive schools and exclusive shops with exclusive items, all unashamedly declaring that they were not for everybody, they were not inclusive. But diversity as a value means inclusion. You can't separate people into different classes, you have to include them all. So I think we need to think very carefully sometimes, especially in education, about terminology that we still use that comes from a different way of thinking about education. We build up assumptions about how to do things through our language. And it's important, I think, it's really important for teachers and educators to think about this and learn about the kind of language that they will use to talk about teaching and learning, because the language that you use builds up the reality. I think it's important for teachers. I think it's also important for students and should be part of media literacy. And by the way, the word I prefer rather than classroom is workshop.